This is the fourth and probably last video on Umar Johnson's wacky PsyD dissertation. However, tomorrow night, that's Saturday, September 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I will be guesting on Lady Luck Club's live stream to discuss his dissertation some more, and I will have some new takes that are pretty damning. I would have placed them in this video, but that would make it too long, so why not perform the big reveal on her show? Should be fun. Again, that's tomorrow night, Saturday, September 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnny Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnny Walker Dread Show.
Just as a note, I'm going to be referring to she throughout this video because I'm pretty sure Tamara Thomas Smith was the one that conducted this study. One more thing, I want to warn those commenting below that I'm going to be referring to the low academic performance of inner city kids. Do not misconstrue my thoughts into thinking that I'm going to cheer you on if you post racist comments. So let's take a look at the results on page 28. Math scores were fairly evenly distributed among students. Nearly 19% earned an A and over 20% earned a B. And I'm telling you right now that there is no way that an inner-city classroom featured nearly half of the students earning an A or a B in mathematics. And notice what's missing. No Fs. No Fs. There are no Fs in math, science, reading, or social studies. And while there are no Fs in writing, less than 6% scored a D. So 94% of the 101 students across 4 grade levels scored at least a C in writing skills. Take a look at science. No Fs and fewer than 9% Ds. In the inner city of Philadelphia? So how well did students do statewide on the state science test? Well, for 8th graders, barely half scored at grade level. But that's statewide. This is an inner-city school in Philadelphia, where the results in this dissertation show that well over 50% scored an A or B, with over a quarter earning an A. This is no reflection on the researcher. This is just raw grade inflation on part of the teachers. I just thought you might find that interesting. I find this funny. The age range spanned from 10 years old, which makes sense because the lower grade in the study is 5th grade, to 16 years old, which is odd because the highest grade is only 8th grade. The kid can drive to school. You had a 16-year-old 8th grader and 4 15-year-olds.
Well now, Johnny, they might have been held back.
How? The school doesn't give out Fs, remember? And yes, he should have started a new paragraph here. You have around 30 of the students claiming their father had completed high school, while nearly 40% had no idea. This is exactly the kind of data that has to be disaggregated according to age, because I can believe a 10-year-old not knowing if his father has a high school diploma, but a 16-year-old? You might say, Johnny, you're being too harsh. Breaking the data out would make for a giant paragraph. Gee, isn't that why we created tables? That would make it so much cleaner and easier to compare, and you wouldn't have to keep repeating earned a grade of, earned a grade of, earning a grade of, earning a grade of. And if you're wondering why some are cast in the past tense while others are cast in the present tense, it's called sloppy writing. Notice how uninviting this paragraph appears. Why didn't he place all this in a table? I'll tell you why. This is padding. He wants to string it all out so that it makes his dissertation look bigger. I also find the next section rather troubling, and not just because he once again should have started a new paragraph. According to the U.S. Census, 46.3% of black children under 18 live only with their mother, while 8% don't live with either their mother or father. That's right, nearly 55% don't have a father in the house. That number is only going to be higher in the inner city classroom. Yet, if you go to the demographics questionnaire handed out to the kids, it asks them for father's job and dad's highest level of education. A substantial majority of the kids in that classroom aren't going to know. What are they going to write down? It's embarrassing to write, I don't know, so many kids will just make something up. What's less embarrassing is a checkbox. Checkboxes, they're a good idea. On one line, the parent is described as father, but on another line, it's dad. And many are very poor readers, despite what grades they're given, with a substantial percentage in special ed. So how many will be able to read extracurricular? Just say hobbies or fun things you like to do when not at school. Now, this is not on Umar, but the original mysterious ghost researcher. Demographic questionnaires appear in just about every social studies program, so you'd think that this would be pretty safe. Just use what everyone else uses. But no, she had to be creative. But Umar's graduate committee should have noted that the demographic questionnaire had serious problems with it. This next sentence is on Umar. Reported occupations for mothers and fathers were very diverse and ranged from blue-collar trade jobs to professional careers. This statement is worthless. I could make this claim in every research paper ever written. After all, it could mean that one student's mother was, say, a school teacher, while all the others were either blue-collar or unemployed. Or it could mean that almost every mother was a white-collar worker and only one or two were unemployed or blue-collar workers. There's no way to tell. And by the way, unemployed is not mentioned here, but it's obviously a factor. Let's see. Inner-city school in Philadelphia. I wonder if all of the parents of these kids have jobs. Here the term diverse is empty, means nothing. If you're writing a research paper of any type, be careful about using such abstractions. Some and many are the worst offenders. They mean nothing. Many of the students reported being abused by their parents. Many? You mean half? Nearly all? What does that mean? If it's parental abuse and therefore a horrible thing, many could mean only 3. Remember the saying, one is too many. The original researcher relied on the harder SPPC questionnaire, which immediately raises the question as to its reliability and validity. Those are just 2 things you always report on whenever using a questionnaire. While Umar discusses issues that could undermine the reliability or validity of the harder instrument, he never discusses how reliable and valid the instrument actually is. So I went poking around. The National Longitudinal Survey of Youth used the harder scale in a massive research study, and they have a section devoted to discussing its validity and reliability. They even cite the source documents for these validity and reliability tests. But Umar never cites them, nor anything else related to validity and reliability of the harder instrument. Remember, this is the main instrument used to collect quantitative data for the study. I don't understand how a social scientist could make this mistake, or how a graduate committee couldn't spot it. In my previous video, I hammered Umar, or whoever wrote this garbage, for adding 2 mysterious categories to an existing survey without ever defining them or verifying their reliability and validity. And that's a big no-no. You can't just add items to an established instrument for a variety of reasons. Tables 1 and 2 show some serious issues with statistical analysis. In both tables, he just writes p less than 0.05. This p-value roughly describes the confidence in your rejecting the null hypothesis. You see, a social studies experiment usually contains a hypothesis, such as students' math performance is strongly influenced by their scholastic competence, from which you form a null hypothesis. Students in the sample survey will not show a strong correlation between math and scholastic competence. The p-value indicates how confidently you can reject the null hypothesis and therefore provide strong evidence that the hypothesis is valid. Something like that. The problem is that no hypotheses related to these data were ever included in this study. So what does p less than 0.05 really say? But it gets worse. No test statistic is ever mentioned, so I have no way of knowing if the p-value was generated with respect to a t-test, chi-square, or whatever. If you go to Table 2, it appears that Umar just assigned p less than 0.05 to anything above r equal to 2 and p less than 0.01 to anything above r equal 3. In other words, he never calculated the p-values at all. And his significant figures are absurd. He knows the R value here to two significant figures, but when he squares it, it becomes 0. So in that instance, we lose all significant figures. But here, we gained from 3 to 4. Or did Thomas Smith do this? We have no way of knowing, because there's zero transparency regarding the source of the data and calculations. We asked her, and she responded that we should just ask the school. Like, really? Keep in mind that a ton of social scientists out there really don't know how to calculate a p-value. To them, a p-value is just a number that their SPSS or R routines crunch out for them. Thomas Smith only has an EDD, not exactly the type of degree that's going to work you hard in the statistics department. And Umar is dumber than even his followers, so it's not surprising that p-values would have given them so much trouble. One more thing. There were only 101 participants, and the regression coefficient here is only 0.1142. That's pretty poor. Whatever test statistic you use, I don't see how you can get a p-value under 0.01. It just doesn't seem reasonable. As it stands so far, these p-values don't make any sense, at least not to me. If I have it wrong, let me know in the comments section. I'm a theorist, not an experimentalist, but I have calculated p-values manually, so I think I'm right in my analysis. This number here should be the same as this number. I mean, identical. But one says 0.000 and the other says 0.008. Which one is correct? Neither of them. Even if you choose the smallest number that could round to 0.029, that is 0.0285, squaring it produces 0.000812, which rounds to 0.001, not 0.008, and certainly not 0. The 0.0309 number here should be the same as here, but it's not. Never minding the sheer sloppiness in these tables. When I look at these values in them, I see nothing. These correlations are, in my opinion, really small. If I was Umar's advisor, I would have told him,
Umar, baby, your correlations suck. There's nothing here. Probably because you mashed all the grade levels together.
if you disaggregate your results according to grade level, you might actually find some stronger correlations. For example, consider the correlation between math and social acceptance. In middle school, you might even find a strong negative correlation with a very tight regression because many middle schoolers who are good in math consider themselves dorks. We'll never know because the original researcher never bothered to disaggregate the data according to grade level. This raises an interesting question. Umar, or whoever you are, students took the time to tell you their grade levels and ages. What was the point of that if you weren't going to break the results down accordingly? I mean, how hard would that have been? It's all in an Excel spreadsheet. For each student, you certainly have a grade level column because you know which classroom you collected the surveys. You also probably have an age column, depending on whether your IRB allowed you to associate each individual to their age. IRB? Oh, what am I talking about? Umar, it was really nothing more than duplicating a column and changing column H to column I in the function call. It would have taken you 30 seconds to flesh this information out, and it might have revealed some very interesting results. Well, assuming the study had been conducted properly. Well, never mind. On page 52 is the summary of qualitative responses, and there are a lot of issues here. It states,
Taken together, the qualitative responses offered by the student respondents reflect a diverse array of opinions that cannot be classified easily.
Right, which is what makes the qualitative data in your dissertation worthless.
Clearly, however, even those living in a highly concentrated neighborhood.
What do you mean by even those? The data only pertains to a highly concentrated neighborhood. You can't generalize beyond that.
Given that respondents ranged in grade and ability level, it would have been interesting to discern whether there were gender or grade differences in the quality of the responses.
So why didn't you? Are you really telling us that the data that you received was not disaggregated according to grade level? You collected demographic data on their grade level and gender. It not only would have been more interesting, it would have been crucial for telling the story. A fifth grader's attitudes toward self-concept and self-worth, especially when it comes to such things like athleticism and personal appearance, are going to be radically different from middle schoolers. We all know that middle school is when kids start becoming obsessed with personal image and begin to have serious anxieties about their self-worth. It's also when you start to get serious about attracting the opposite sex. And who among you doesn't think that males and females would have distinctly different self-concept indicators? So the qualitative analysis section is where some of the real fun begins, and I'm going to have a lot more to talk about that tomorrow night. But let's take a look at some of these responses here.
Being black has affected my performance in school by people talking about other African Americans, or how black you are, or European American you are.
And Umar goes on to say that this may suggest that many African American children have become self-conscious about their racial identity as a result of peer taunting. Where does the peer taunting come into play here? There was no mention of that. So here, Umar is injecting value judgments into the responses that don't belong. Here's another one.
Being black means a lot to me because being black and having my ancestors fight for rights is a blessing.
As I will talk about tomorrow night, that response was written by Umar, not a student. But let's go ahead and read on here. According to Umar, that means it's indicative of a child who feels honored and endowed with a strong sense of ancestral obligation towards doing well academically and personally. And nowhere does the kid make any such claim. He just says that being black means a lot to him. Nothing about academics or personal characteristics. Here's another one.
Being black has affected me because European American people look at black people like we're crazy.
And Umar responds, again, this reply is suggestive of possible negative interactions with European Americans. However, this position also could come from a historical or cultural instruction in which African American children can learn, and quite candidly, from television and history books just how inhumanely their ancestors were treated by European Americans. That's a value judgment, an opinion. It has no business in a qualitative analysis. I just don't get it. Each classroom completed the questionnaires, and so each stack of materials collected from each classroom would have targeted a particular grade level. So why can't you tell us how each grade level responded to the prompts? This is insane. Whoever performed the study, and it wasn't you, Umar, just threw all the results from 4 different classrooms into a common batch? Now, you might even go further and say that the materials completed by each student should have been tagged to the personal identification of the student. In other words, participant 38 completed questionnaires that are marked participant 38. Clearly, that didn't happen. And why? I suspect that the original researcher never got IRB approval or only got an exempt classification. Once you make it possible to trace a questionnaire to the student who completed it and their grades, the IRB approval becomes far more stringent and therefore requires more effort. And we can't have that. I mean, effort. Oh, that's the E word. Here's what pisses me off. If I was Umar and I came across this archival data and noticed that it didn't contain that which was important, what would I do? I would set up a study with questionnaires designed for what I was seeking to uncover. I would have arranged for classroom students to receive these questionnaires, and I would enter the data and perform the calculations. That means I would have had to undergo the rigors of the IRB approval, which would require that I take part in the IRB's mandated trainings. And yes, doing all that takes time and effort. But that is what is supposed to make this doctoral level research. Umar didn't want to do any of that. He simply wanted to lean on the data collected by someone else and probably their calculations as well. But I think it's even worse than that. And if you're interested, stay tuned tomorrow night at 8 p.m. EST as I will live stream with Lady Luck Club and reveal what I think truly happened with Umar's research. And it's bad. Like my video and subscribe to my channel.